The opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your financial advisor. Happy 2025. I can't even believe that I'm saying that. It's a new year, and for many, it's time for a fresh start. And this year, a lot of people are focusing on their finances. A study from Motley Fool Money found that 69% of Americans plan to make a financial resolution in 2025, with paying down debt coming in as the top goal. If you're looking to improve your money management skills in the new year, it might be worth setting some financial New Year's resolutions. Joining me today is Chris Burkle. He's the president of Axis Financial and has been in the financial industry for more than 2 decades. So my first question for you would be, what are your thoughts on making financial New Year's resolutions? Do you recommend them? Do you think they're helpful?
I mean, yes and no. Financial health is really a lifelong journey. In my opinion, it's kind of going back to advice that I received from my family growing up. It's always the right time to do the right thing, right? But New Year's resolutions can help be a springboard for people to kind of refocus. It's like hitting the reset button a little bit and saying, okay, well, the things that I've been putting off for the previous years, I'm really going to go after it now. Starting January 1, here we go. Like, I'm going to get my health in line. I'm going to get all these things. I'm going to take care of my finances. I think the negative effect in the past, you look at like gym membership statistics and all of these different things where people will start strong. And then if they get off track, maybe by, February, March, April, then it's kind of like, I didn't get my workout in this morning, so that pizza at 11 o'clock tonight, PM looks pretty enticing. When you look at that for the year and, you kind of fall off the bandwagon, so to speak, then the negative effect of that is that you could, kind of shoot the whole year and say, well, I guess I'll get off to a better start next year. And then you actually don't get done what you need to get done.
Yeah. So like you were kind of going into this, but sticking to New Year's resolutions can be hard. I think when the new year comes, everybody's all inspired and it's a fresh, clean slate to eat healthier and do this and do that and save money and all these different things. What advice would you have to maybe help somebody stick to those?
First of all, I think you've got to commit to it mentally. It's just interesting. One of the most influential things, or one of the best pieces of advice that my dad gave me when I was young, is the longest, hardest distance that you'll ever have to travel is the 6 inches between your ears. And that just has always kind of stuck with me, that everything is kind of starts mentally.
Yes.
Right? If we can commit to it in our mind, then really all the actions and everything will follow. And so I think, you've got to have a plan. I don't know who actually created this quote. It certainly wasn't me, but it's something that I've always kind of kept in the back of my mind, which is, everyone ends up somewhere, but few end up there on purpose. And so having a plan that you can create, that you can stick to, is key. And then, when as you're kind of creating that plan mentally, getting on board mentally, then you can kind of look at the practical application of that. So, when you're talking about creating a plan, sticking to a plan, goal setting even, I think that, trying to make it automatic is a big deal, because it's kind of like the benefit of people's 401ks. And, they have a deduction out of their paycheck every single pay period, whatever their mode is, but it's being deducted. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And then, years later, they look back and go, hey, this was pretty neat that I just was doing this every pay period. And so making it automatic would be key. When you get a 5% raise or whatever the raise is, think about increasing that your savings by that 5%. So there's little practical things like that that you can do to make sure that you get where you're going. And lately, I've been receiving a question a lot from clients and different people about, all right, well, I've got debt and I want to save. What do you do? It certainly depends on the person's situation. But there's definitely practical applications and things that people can do, whatever the obstacles that they're facing or whatever it looks like, make the plan specific to them.
Around this time of year, do a lot of your clients like come to you and say, hey, I want to change course next year. I want to get better at saving, or I want to buy a home, or I want to beef up my retirement fund. Do you have a lot of people that kind of come to you when the new year comes?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, the estate attorney that's in my office, he always will, knowing that, he always said, yeah, that's fine. I mean, I know things have come up throughout the year, but just, do it before you die. And everybody kind of chuckles at that. But yeah, so I think, there's something that I've always kind of told or shared with clients and with people. And I'll tell them, write this acronym. And the acronym is ACE. And so, you always want to have the ability to adapt and adjust because life happens. It's not a set it and forget it kind of situation. You always want to have the ability to adapt and adjust. C, you always want to have control and freedom over what you're accomplishing or your portfolio or whatever it is. And then E, you always want to have an exit strategy. So if things are not going the way that you expected, then how do you get out? How do you make those changes? And so, yes, absolutely, people will come to me all throughout the year and say, I was trying this. I think we need to adjust here, or we need to adapt here, or this happened in my situation, my family situation changed, my financial situation changed. And so, what was applicable before is not the case today.
Right. I really like that you bring that up too, because I think in general, I think it's getting better, but I think finances are still a taboo topic for a lot of people. They feel like shameful to admit that they might need help or don't know what they're doing. So I really like that you kind of bring that up, that life happens and sometimes the plans you put in place may not be working for you, and that's fine. Like, the important thing is to be able to go get help or have, be able to address it before it gets bad.
Well, who can't look back and say, well, man, I wish I would have known that, or I wish I would have done that better. So hindsight's always 20/20. So, but being astute enough or having people that can talk with you to say, you know what, maybe we need to do something a little bit going forward, because the same thing that we were trying back then is not really what's going to get us there in the future. So, yeah, there's no reason to feel bad about it. Just adjust.
A report from Motley Fool found that younger generations are more likely than older generations to make financial resolutions. Do you have any thoughts on why that may be?
When you look at the traditional view of retirement in the past, depending on someone's age and stage in life, either their grandparents or parents, retiring was generally a pretty simple topic for them. They worked so many years, they got a pension and got, 80 to 90, broad strokes on the canvas, 80 to 90% of whatever they were earning when they were working. And then had Social Security, and they were set. They worked for years at this company and had those things taken care of. And so that's why, it was a generally simple kind of topic. But as things were changing, you had the defined benefit or the pensions that were sort of going away and shifting more responsibilities on individuals. It was really when the next generation didn't realize or started to realize rather that they didn't have the pension and they weren't saving enough. Then people started to talk about that. And so there wasn't a lot of information out there. So when you look at culturally how things have shifted, it was really, it's really been kind of over 30 years of mistakes and not saving enough, where people were kind of waking up and going, hey, you really need to be saving more and putting money aside, because no one's going to take care of you except you. Think about 2005, you had MySpace coming on the scene. You had all these different, and then, fast forward, you had Facebook and YouTube, and now there's just so much more information readily available at our fingertips, where people are talking about, you need to save, and here's how you save and do things. And so now you see culturally how things have shifted. And I think that's brought the awareness where people younger are definitely saving more, because again, 30 years of mistakes, people weren't saving. And now the transfer of information and how that's actually getting to the younger information is certainly more prevalent than it ever was before.
Yeah, I like that you bring that up. It's kind of a culmination of a lot of things, like losing the pension and the uncertainty with Social Security, especially the social media piece. I think that's something we don't even think about, is how much that's influencing the way our culture is changing. For anybody who's thinking about going into 2025 and wants to improve their finances, do you have any examples of maybe like some practical financial resolutions or ways to start?
Save if you're not. If you are, maybe increase it. Pay off debt. Credit card debt too is the worst. Just you've got high interest rates, revolving credit, variable interest rates. I mean, it's so high. I would actually, maybe even put the savings on hold a little bit to pay off that credit card debt. But again, it's really whatever that situation needs is really what should be done. I hear this quite a lot. It's just creating a reward punishment system.
Yeah.
So if you're restricting yourself and you're either going out and making more money, or you're reducing the overhead and the expenses so that you can have more ability to either save or pay off debt or whatever the case may be, stick to the plan. Well, how do you stick to it? Give yourself a reward. So if you stick to it, you've got to create this. I can't, I don't know exactly what's going to motivate you more than you do probably, but you create a plan that maybe in 3 months or 6 months or a year that you've been sticking to the plan, then you reward yourself. Maybe that is, hey, we're going to go out to dinner to the place that we've always wanted to go, or we're even, something bigger, maybe a longer time period. Say, we're going to take a weekend trip and go do this because we've been diligent and we've stuck to the plan this whole time. The other part of that is, on the flip side of that, is if you blow it.
Yeah.
I was talking about, you were asking me about the New Year's resolutions and people that fall off the wagon. Well, if you are accountable to your own punishment system, say, if I fall off the wagon and I'm not as diligent with my savings, I impose a punishment on myself, and that will actually motivate you to, maybe because you say, well, gosh, now I've got this reward set up for 3 months from now, and then you're not working the plan diligently, and then you say, well, my punishment is now I have to kick that back 6 months. Right. Or whatever it is, but you come up with a punishment and a reward system that helps you stick with the plan, because the best plan is the one that you work.
This is maybe a little bit off topic, but I want to go back a little bit when you were talking about credit card debt and kind of holding off on savings. They always say you should keep like 3 to 6 months in an emergency fund. But if you're struggling with massive credit card debt, how do you balance the two?
Great question. I know I don't want to sound redundant here, as I've said multiple times, that it does just depend on the specifics of that individual's situation. But again, broad strokes on the canvas, you do want to save and have some money set aside. But there's also a little bit of an emotional bias here, where how do you feel when you lay your head down on your pillow at night and go to sleep? In other words, if you know that just you're one emergency away from having a catastrophic event happening that's going to wipe you out, and you need to have a savings there, then okay. There's a lot of factors and variables that can go into where you would spend the priority or put the priority. But I'm just saying that, if you've got this debt that has high interest, it's very difficult if you're working a plan to get that paid off. And so it kind of is on the same wavelength or vein when people come in and they say, this is a question I get a lot, which is, I really want to pay off my house. Should I do that? Should I take money from my retirement accounts, and should I pay my house off, or should I not? And, I have to go back to when I was a kid, and, my dad was really emphasizing with me to pay off debt. And I do believe that is fantastic advice, but you're also dealing with a culture at that time economically where interest rates were very, very high. Right. I mean, CDs were 15%, mortgages were 17 to 24%. And so, absolutely pay off debt. But if your interest rate on your debt, or like in this case, when they're asking about paying off a mortgage, if your interest rate is a very low interest rate, maybe your mortgage on your home is 2.75, well, maybe you shouldn't pay off the house just yet because of the interest you can get from certain investments. Now, please don't misunderstand. I know a lot of advisors will say, well, just have the money in the market because over time you're going to get a higher interest rate. And so you're better off having money in savings than paying off debt. I do not hold to that philosophy. That is not what I'm saying. But here's kind of the rule of thumb. If the interest on the debt is lower than what you can get from safe money accounts, i.e., maybe treasury bonds, CDs, something like that, high yield money market accounts or savings accounts. So if you're getting a 4% return from safe money and your mortgage on your home is 3%, then it really doesn't make sense to pay off the mortgage at that point because you're earning more by having that money in the safe accounts in savings, because you can always take that money and pay off the debt. So when I was talking about tackling the credit cards, it just historically, they have very, very high interest rates that are certainly higher than what you can get from your safe money accounts. And so that's why I was kind of honing in or zeroing in on paying off the credit card debt.
I racked up a lot of credit card debt moving to Florida during the pandemic for a job that didn't pay me enough to move down there. So, and because of that, I wasn't really able to like make a savings either. So right when I moved back in with my parents, my goal was to pay off the credit card. And then in doing that, I didn't have any savings and I was commuting quite a ways to work. So I was like, okay, well, I want to move closer to work now. And then I ended up kind of pretty much racking up all the debt that I had paid off due to like not having savings. So that's why I was just kind of wondering, like, how do you balance that to where now that I have a new job and I moved back in with my parents, I've taken a different approach to where now I'm like trying to get my emergency fund at a certain place while just making the minimum on the debt that I have right now until I feel like I have my emergency fund where I want it. Then I want to kind of pivot to attacking the debt a little harder. But I feel like that's just tricky. Absolutely.
And that's a story for a lot of people, right? And so I'm so glad that you actually brought that up. And for you, thank you for being so open about your situation. But, a lot of people are in that situation. And so this is where people's specifics dictate the advice that would be given. So let's say if somebody's older, they're in a different age and stage of life, and they're talking about paying off debt, but maybe they've got some health history or some more different risk factors where it would be more important to focus on the savings before paying off the debt, because if something happens catastrophic and they don't have the savings, then they just potentially go into more debt. So, but somebody who's young and, and they're not maybe in a risky profession, well, you are playing a little bit of the odds, but it's like, well, what's the likelihood of something happening to me? And again, I know that anything can happen, but it's kind of like, well, what are the odds of something happening that would really throw me off, where I would have to have a savings plan and that be my focus for my plan?
I like to do a little segment called Our 2 Cents, but really it's your 2 cents. So what would your 2 cents be for anyone who is thinking about, maybe doesn't necessarily have like financial resolutions even, but just people who want to get more involved in their finances or want to focus on that in 2025? What advice do you have for them to get started?
Well, you are asking very good loaded questions, and so it's I was thinking about, okay, well, where do I start, because there's so much there to unpack. But I always like to tell people, and I can't take credit for this. I got this from my estate attorney, but I don't even know if they're doing this anymore in schools, but when I was a kid, there was the fire drill. right? It's like, you'd practice and in the event of a fire and I guess in certain areas, whether, maybe it's a tornado drill or whatever it is, but you would interrupt class. They would have the sirens go off. You get into a line, you either walk outside if it was a fire drill, you go down to the basement or whatever it is. And you would run these drills and you did it for a practice scenario. Well, the one thing that he does and he recommends people to do, and I've adopted this, is do a fire drill of your plan. Every year or whatever it is, sound the alarm. So if in the estate planning scenario, if you were to pass away, what would be, that would be the alarm sounding. Well, what is the plan at that point? Is your plan fail safe? Do you have all the necessary pieces so that if you passed away, what would your heirs do when they first walked into the house? Where would they start? What would happen? And so when you constantly look at where you're at and are there things that you need to look at? Maybe do you need to highlight some areas in your plan that have some exposure that we maybe or a little bit of a tiny hole in the boat that there's a little bit of a leak that needs to get fixed or plugged up, because you just don't want to be sitting here 3 years from now, 4 years from now and going, man, I wish I would have known that.
All right. That does it for this edition of Not Your Father's 2 Cents. Sources used in this episode will be linked in the description. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll meet you back here next week.